Welcome, and everybody. We're diving deep today into the world of Ricardo Quaresma, and we're really going beyond the surface level stuff, like just the typical sports bio. We're getting into the nitty gritty, those mind-blowing details that make Quaresma such a unique player. So to really get a complete picture, we got a whole stack of articles here, some skill breakdowns, even a YouTube video giving us a glimpse into his world. Really a good mix of perspectives, I think. So Quaresma's story. It all begins in Lisbon, Portugal. And he quickly made a name for himself at Sporting Lisbon.
It really is fascinating to think about that environment. Portugal, it's like a breeding ground for some of the best football talent in the world. But even in that super competitive landscape, Quaresma just stood out. He was turning heads as a teenager, playing alongside Cristiano Ronaldo. Can you imagine those training sessions?
Wow. Talk about a dynamic duo in the making. But before we get too far ahead, we have to talk about the move that's basically synonymous with Quaresma. The Trivela. For those who haven't seen it, picture this. Quaresma strikes the Blair. With the outside of his foot, it generates this unbelievable curve, almost like it defies physics.
It's a move that takes so much practice and finesse. You really need to have this deep understanding of ball control and almost an intuitive sense of timing to pull it off.
So it's not just showmanship. There's like a real tactical advantage to using the Trivela.
Oh, absolutely. When it's executed correctly, the Trivela is a weapon. It's incredibly difficult for opponents to anticipate because the ball moves in such a strange way. You just don't expect it.
So from those early days at Sporting, Quaresma's talent was obvious. But it wasn't always smooth sailing for him. His move to Barcelona, it was surprisingly short-lived. Some might even call it a misstep.
Well, I think it's important to understand the context here. At that time, Barcelona was known for this really structured, possession-based style of play under manager Ricardo. There was a clear system, and players were expected to follow it very closely.
So you're saying Quaresma, with his flair and individual brilliance, might not have been the best fit for that kind of environment.
Exactly. It seems like his more improvisational style. It clashed with Ricardo's philosophy. There were even reports of conflicts between the two.
Almost like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. You've got this incredibly gifted player, but he's being asked to conform to a style that just doesn't play to his strengths.
It's a classic dilemma in football. And you know what? It's one that Quaresma faced throughout his whole career. This tension between individual expression and tactical discipline. It became a recurring theme for him.
It's interesting you say that because after Barcelona, he went on to play for Inter Milan and Chelsea, two more massive clubs, with very specific tactical demands. Did this pattern continue for him?
It did. And in both those cases, he really struggled to establish himself. At Inter, he was even labeled the worst transfer of the year by some Italian media.
Wow. That's harsh. I'm guessing those teardrop tattoos he has are a reminder of that difficult period.
It seems that way. And those tattoos really symbolize the challenges he faced throughout his career, the highs and lows, the triumphs and setbacks.
So it wasn't all sunshine and roses for him?
No, not at all. He had his share of criticism, for sure, and he had to overcome a lot of obstacles. But there's another layer to his story that we haven't touched on yet. His Roma heritage.
That's right. He's been very open about his background and the discrimination that he's faced. It's a side of him that's often overlooked when people talk about his skills and his playing style.
And it's so important to acknowledge this part of who he is. He's spoken out against racism, challenged prejudice, and become a powerful advocate for Roma rights.
And his nickname, Cigano, which means gypsy in Portuguese, is that something he embraces as part of activism?
Absolutely. It's a term that's often been used in a negative way. But Quaresma has reclaimed it as a symbol of his heritage and a reminder of the struggles his community faces.
From what I've read, it was his move to Beşiktaş in Turkey. That really marked a turning point in his career. And the YouTube video we have, it captures the incredible reception he got when he first arrived there.
It was like a hero's welcome. The fans absolutely adored him. They saw him as the player who could bring the club back to glory.
But even there, his relationship with his manager, Şenol Güneş, was a little bit complex. There's this story about him getting substituted in a game, and Güneş challenged him to be the first one back at training to prove his dedication. Does that story fit into this larger picture of Quaresma struggling with discipline?
It's a great example of that push and pull between Quaresma's individual brilliance and the need to fit into a team structure. Güneş, you see, he was known for his tactical discipline. He's trying to get the best out of Quaresma while also demanding that commitment from him.
So there was some friction, but also a mutual respect there. And it sounds like in the end it worked out pretty well for both of them. But wow, we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive. I want to pause here for a second and ask you, what stood out to you so far about Quaresma? What surprised you? Think about that for a minute. We'll be back soon to explore more of his career and the complexities of his story. Stick with us.
You know, it's funny. This whole idea of discipline when it comes to Quaresma, it's interesting. On the surface, you see those flashes of brilliance, the unpredictable moves. And you might think, well, maybe there's a lack of structure there. But then you dig a little deeper, and you find these stories about his intense training regimen, his clean lifestyle, even his dedication to mentoring these younger players.
Yeah, it's almost like this disconnect between the public perception of him and the reality of who he is as a person and a professional. The YouTube video really challenges that stereotype. There's this footage of him working with these young players after training, just patiently showing them different techniques, giving them advice. It doesn't exactly scream undisciplined, does it?
Not at all. And I think it shows a genuine passion for the sport, this desire to pass on what he's learned, to inspire the next generation. It adds a whole other dimension to his personality.
And his relationship with Şenol Güneş at Beşiktaş seems to further complicate this whole idea of discipline. It wasn't always smooth sailing between them, right?
No, it wasn't. Their dynamic is really fascinating. You have Güneş, the disciplinarian, known for his tactical rigidity. And then you have Quaresma, this free spirit, thriving on improvisation. It created this really interesting tension between the two.
But it also seemed to bring out the best in both of them. Like, Güneş pushed Quaresma to be more disciplined, more team-oriented, while Quaresma brought this creativity and unpredictability to Beşiktaş's play.
Yeah, it's that classic push and pull,
You know.
between structure and freedom that we see so often in football. And in this case, it led to a really successful period for the club.
They were winning trophies, playing this exciting brand of football. And Quaresma became a huge fan favorite in Istanbul. It's like he finally found a place where his talents were both appreciated and utilized effectively.
He was embraced by the fans,
Yeah.
celebrated for his individuality. It was such a contrast to some of his earlier experiences, where he maybe felt stifled or misunderstood.
It's almost like he needed that freedom, that trust from his manager and teammates to truly flourish. And it's interesting to think about this because despite his individual brilliance, Quaresma also achieved some significant success on the international stage with Portugal. He played a key role in their Euro 2016 victory, scored some crucial goals, showcased his skills on the world's biggest stage.
It was a moment of redemption for him, a chance to silence those critics and to prove his worth at the highest level. And he did it with that same flair and unpredictability that had always been a part of his game.
But even with all those accomplishments, it feels like he's often been overshadowed by his longtime friend and teammate, Cristiano Ronaldo. These two players from the same generation, both incredibly talented, but with such different paths.
It is an interesting comparison. You have Ronaldo, the epitome of discipline and dedication, the ultimate professional, and then Quaresma, the maverick, the artist, who maybe prioritized individual expression over that absolute consistency.
Two sides of the same coin, each representing a different aspect of Portuguese football. But I wonder, do you think Quaresma ever felt any resentment towards Ronaldo's success? Did he feel like he was living in Ronaldo's shadow at all?
It's hard to say for sure, but there's no doubt their careers have gone in very different directions. Ronaldo, the global icon, breaking records left and right, winning countless trophies, and Quaresma, the more enigmatic figure, whose brilliance has been mixed with those moments of frustration and inconsistency.
Yet it seems like there's a genuine respect between the two of them. I mean, they've known each other since they were teenagers, played together at Sporting. On the national team, there's a history there.
And maybe recognition that they both contributed to Portuguese football in their own unique ways. Ronaldo, the polished diamond, and Quaresma, this rough-hewn gem.
But Quaresma's story goes beyond just football. He's become this vocal advocate for social justice, speaking out against racism, using his platform to bring awareness to the challenges faced by the Roma community. It takes a lot of courage to do that, especially in a world where athletes are often pressured to just stick to sports.
It does, and it shows that he has a deeper sense of purpose, this willingness to use his influence for good. He's not afraid to challenge the status quo, to speak truth to power.
It's really inspiring to see an athlete using their platform in such a meaningful way. But as his playing career winds down, what do you think lies ahead for Quaresma?
Well, he's talked about getting into coaching.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't be surprising at all. I mean, imagine the lessons he could share with young players, the creativity and passion he could instill in them.
That would be fascinating to see. But beyond coaching, do you see him continuing with his activism?
Absolutely. That commitment seems very genuine. He appears to be driven to create positive change, to fight for equality and justice.
So even as he steps away from the pitch, his impact will continue to be felt. But we've talked a lot about his activism, his relationship with Ganesh, even his dynamic with Ronaldo. I want to go back to this idea of discipline for a second. You mentioned earlier that he actually lives a very disciplined life, despite what some people may think. Can you expand on that a bit? What does that look like for him?
Well, from what I've read, he's incredibly strict with his diet and his training. He avoids alcohol, late nights, and focuses on staying in peak physical condition.
So it's like he channels that discipline into his craft, into honing those skills, into maximizing his potential on the pitch.
Exactly. And it really challenges this assumption that creativity and discipline can't coexist. In Quaresma's case, they do. And they even complement each other.
So maybe the question isn't whether he's disciplined or not, but rather how he defines discipline and how it shows up in different areas of his life.
That's a great point. And it really speaks to the complexities of who he is as a person, the way he defies these easy categories.
He's kind of a walking contradiction in some ways, a paradox, which makes him all the more fascinating to explore.
Absolutely. And as we move into the final part of our deep dive, it's worth thinking about. What will his legacy be? How will he be remembered? Will it be for those incredible skills, his activism, or his complex personality?
These are the questions we'll be discussing as we wrap up our exploration of Ricardo Quaresma. Stick with us.
All right, so we're back. And, thinking about everything we've talked about, his incredible skills, his complex relationship with discipline, his activism, and even his dynamic with Ronaldo, it all leads back to this question of legacy. How will Quaresma be remembered? It's tough to say, isn't it? His legacy's not so simple. I mean, on one hand, you can't deny his impact on the game itself. The Trivela, it's iconic. A testament to his creativity, his completely unique approach to football.
Yeah, and it transcends language almost. Like anyone can watch that move and appreciate it, whether you know anything about football or not.
Exactly. It's just pure audacity and beauty. But even beyond the Trivela, there's a whole highlight reel of moments where he just defied expectations, made the impossible seem possible.
He could single-handedly change the direction of a game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Create something from nothing.
With just a flick of his foot.
And that's something that will always be remembered, that sense of awe and wonder he inspired in fans.
But it's not just about the skills on the pitch, though, right? Yeah. We talked about his activism, too. His willingness to speak out against injustice, to stand up for his Roma heritage. Those qualities resonate with people.
It takes a lot of courage to do what he did, to use his platform like that. It's inspiring.
Especially for young people looking for role models.
Exactly. He showed that athletes can be more than just entertainers. They can be agents of change, using their influence to really make a difference.
And I think that's a huge part of his legacy, that authenticity, that refusal to compromise who he is.
Never afraid to be himself.
Yeah.
To express himself, both on and off the pitch.
And even though his playing days are coming to an end, it feels like his story is far from over. He's mentioned coaching.
Oh, yeah. Imagine that.
You would be exciting to see.
Passing on all that knowledge and passion.
To the next generation.
Definitely.
And beyond coaching. I could see him continuing his activism, too.
Oh, absolutely.
That commitment seems so strong.
He's driven to make things better.
To fight for equality.
To fight for justice.
So no matter what he decides to do, it's clear that he'll bring that same passion and intensity to everything he does.
No doubt about it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I have one final question for you listening. What will you take away from Ricardo Quaresma's story? Will you remember these incredible goals, the audacious moves, those moments of pure brilliance on the field? Or will it be something more, a reminder that it's okay to be different, to embrace your individuality, to fight for what you believe in, even when it's difficult? Those are the questions I hope you'll keep thinking about long after this deep dive is over. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of Ricardo Quaresma.